Wide receiver room is special this season, and even they know it. How do they take it to the next level? Today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome to a brand new week, Chiefs Kingdom. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. You can get over there because they're making every single moment more with a daily boost or bonus for everyone, everywhere, every day. All you got to do is get over there and get in the action yourself all summer long. It's over at FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to get started here as the Chiefs prepare for their first preseason week. After a day off over the weekend, they're back on the field for a 10-10-10. A couple of things were quite revealing. We're going to go over it for you all the way in depth today. This is Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner over here. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com. Maybe one day I'll get that right. And RGR Football, where we're having a lot of fun, and we are doing live shows every Monday night at 7 Central. Make sure you join us there. If you want to get in on the action, make sure you subscribe to this channel because we're free and available every platform, every day, at least 5 days a week for free. Starting here on YouTube, like, sub, get over to the podcast on Spotify, on Apple Music, and anywhere you can get a free show. And then if you want that much more breaking news, how this is going to fall out, and our observations, it's over at 816-357-8781. That is for you locos, you everyday listeners that want the inside scoop. We appreciate you guys, and it is just for you that we do this kind of thing. So what's going on today as the Chiefs get back at it in what is more of a preparatory cycle for what is a ball game come the regular season? For the rookies, that's going to be important. Had a visitor at camp, and there's debatable amounts of impact that this could have, but if you didn't see it, I didn't see it till after the fact, but it has something there. We're going to talk about that coming up later in the show. Finding the right 22. It's still an ongoing process and will evolve dramatically after the first preseason game. So we're still not there on what the lineup is, but there's a couple of hints. And we start today with the biggest turnaround, I think, that we've been talking about and that we've seen on the field in training camp to this point, and that is just the level of play at the wide receiver position. Sky Moore was on the podium today, got to hear a little bit of insight from his perspective inside the room. A guy who's been training with Patrick going into his third year. He, Justin Watson, have been with him quite a bit, but called it the most talented room they've had yet. And I think I can agree with that overall. Now, when Jeremy Maclin here, different story, top heavy, not quite as deep. Last year, just had the top, didn't have much that could even from the top row really see home runs there. And so the whole thing was lower. Now it looks like you have the top end and you have depth. That's exactly what I'm looking for if I'm Andy Reid. And it looks like they're going to have plenty of options to get themselves the right 6 guys on this roster.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun to see how that shakes out. Really excited to see that. And I do think that Mahomes is looking forward to using this receiving core to its fullest and really going scorched earth. I'm sure. I just want to thank the NFL for his number 4 spot in the top 100. Thank you for that. 3-peat loading, I will say, in my opinion, and we don't need to focus on it, but it's funny to me. Regardless, you look at this and you look at the wide receiver room that they have, and you talk about the depth that they have at wide receiver that they didn't have last year. I mean, their top guy was MVS last year for most of the season until Rashee Rice came on late. And then you have a guy in Rashee Rice who, as a rookie, played really well late in the season and helped a lot in the playoffs, but he wasn't as successful early on in the season. And Mahomes really struggled and had an off year last year to an extent. And I talked about that on Chiefs Corner a lot, and just talking about his stats and the way he didn't look as good as he normally does. He tried to elevate the people around him, but the talent level wasn't there. And now you're in a situation where you have a guy like Hollywood Brown, you have Rashee Rice coming back in for his sophomore year, which he looks just as good, if not better, than he did last year. So I think that's going to be a plus. And then you got a guy like Xavier Worthy, and that doesn't even take into account the guys that have already been here in like a Justin Watson and a Sky Moore and a Kadarius Toney and McCole Hardman and Justin Ross and all those guys who basically have all taken steps back in where they were on the roster last year and their possible wide receiver depth position at least. Watson right now, to me, I think is probably a best 4. I don't think he can get to a top 3 wide receiver based on what we've seen from Worthy. Now, is it possible that they use Watson more early in the season as they continue to try to get Worthy to acclimate? Yes, I will say that that's possible. And I would almost say it's probable, to be honest, because I think that they need to get him acclimated to the real speed. Practice is one thing. Games are going to be another. We'll see how Worthy does in the preseason and how he adjusts to the NFL speed, but it's going to be a whole different thing the first part of the season for him as well.
Yeah, you got to wrinkle him in there. And every week's install is a little bit different, so that makes sense. I expect them to pepper him in, and maybe Watson gets starts, in 11 personnel. That's fine. But I think the drastic difference is the top 3 are so elite at one trait that has been sorely missing here. She's had a little bit of deep speed last year with MVS. It is a little too one note there. Kadarius isn't a downfield threat as much, right? But the difference is, and we've seen this over and over and over with MVS the last few years, the difference now is you have 3 receivers that can get behind a defense in different variations. Maybe Rasheed isn't like take the top off the safeties, but the other 2 are, and they all track the ball through the air. The Chiefs are going to tell you, hey, we're not emphasizing the deep game, but we see it day after day after day. Maybe the Chiefs aren't, but Patrick Mahomes certainly is, because every day at training camp, he's going deep to Hollywood and he's going deep to Worthy over the top. And that's because they can not only get loose, but track the ball into their hands. And that's the most important thing. Wide receiver's job, catch the ball.
Yeah, and I would say that we need to be a little careful. I'm not going to say that they're not going to take more deep shots. I think they will take more deep shots this year. But with the amount of deep shots they've been taking in training camp, I don't think that's going to go to the regular season. I think that they're trying to push and trying to work on and trying to get better at taking those shots and get the chemistry there on those types of shots when it doesn't matter what they're doing, where it doesn't count. And then you can get into a game situation and put them in as you need them. I still think there's going to be a ton of stuff that's in the intermediate and the underneath. They're probably going to take 4 or 5 deep shots a game would be my guess. But I don't think we're going to see, 10 deep shots or more in a game unless, they just find something that they can beat on a consistent basis against specific teams. I just don't think you're going to see that week in, week out. And you're seeing that every single practice with Mahomes taking deep shots. And in some of these cases today, this is in 10-10-10. This is when you're supposed to be taking those deep shots, work on that kind of thing, because you have first team versus second or third team. So it's perfect for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be prevalent, but it does depend on what the defense gives you. You have to be able to take advantage of it, and you have to have the right people to do that. There are still position groups that are going through that evolution of finding the right fit. That's coming up next here in the Locked On Podcast Network.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day. Maybe it's arm day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are even more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Thank you for making us your first listen today for your Kansas City Chiefs. Now pick up the next one, and the best option right now is Locked On Fantasy Football. Vinny's going to get you situated for your drafts, and he's got everyday insight all through the season for your fantasy needs. As part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day is a search in certain position groups. Now, wide receivers, yes, they're always making plays, but we have a pretty steady point about who the top 4 are, and maybe there's some churn at the bottom. It's still a process in a couple of other spots around the roster. Saw Kelvin Joseph elevated at corner last week, then pulls the hamstring. Joshua Williams back working with the ones today. Najee Johnson back on the field, but not necessarily getting the clean reps because of the return to the field. Same thing with Jalen Watson, had the non-contact jersey taken off today, but didn't see reps with the ones in 11s in particular. So again, this is a 10-10-10 practice. It's about speed and execution, but he does have that ability to get back.
He was out there working with the both of those guys were out there working with the scout team. Just wanted to say that really quick. They were out there in 11s, but it wasn't with the ones. I think that's going to change in the future, but I said this on Twitter or X. You have to get them acclimated. You have to work them back into shape and work them back into working with the team. And, another one is Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney was, out on the sideline or not on the sideline. He practiced, I think, in the team because they're not really hitting, but then, practiced in like warmups. But when they got into the team, Mike Caliendo came back in and Thuney went off to work on the side. He's going to acclimate a lot slower than the rest of them. That's fine. He hasn't worked at all. I think that's something that you take into account. And we'll see how long it takes Kelvin Joseph to be out or to be back. Justin Watson getting back out there as quickly as he did, I think, is impressive. It shows that he's, not really lost things. So we'll see how that turns out. The one that sticks out to me, and I know you were talking about defense for the most part, but Deneric Prince still getting run with the ones. He is the guy that is getting the run with the ones, as opposed to a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And the longer that goes on, and if we see it in the preseason, that tells you kind of where they sit and how things I think are going to shake out. And I'm really curious to see if that continues and how things are going to go in the preseason games, which we haven't mentioned yet, but we're less than a week away from the Chiefs taking the field and playing their first preseason game on Saturday. So there's going to be a lot going on for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, if you are new to this show, we've been covering this team going on 8 years. We do live post games as the pressers are coming out, so we get a little bit more information. You can find us both immediately post game on our own outlets as well as this. So make sure that you like and sub. And that does become part of the problem, and we will do those in the preseason, is getting the amount of information that the team needs to get from these preseason games. Running back is still another position that I think is completely up in the air behind the starter. The starter's locked in. It's not a question. It's not going to be a question unless there's an injury, and knock on wood, Pop seems like he's in good shape this year. So I do feel confident about that.
No, and I 100% agree with you. I just want to say that he's gotten to a point now where I think he could be a 3-down back. I'm not saying that they're going to use him as such, but he has gotten to a point where he has the ability to be that guy because he can now do the pass protection. He can now go out and catch passes like he's done the past couple of years. He has now gotten to the point where he can be the full-time running back, although I do think that they're going to still sprinkle guys in from time to time.
I think they have to. And I think getting some reps certainly showed out against one of the Chiefs' best linebackers last week in one-on-ones. That was a progression. I will clarify this, though. Drew Tranquill is not the elite pass rusher that you're going to face on some teams at the linebacker position as well. So I'm not 100% that I'm there. But like you said, you got to have somebody to fill in for him. And if Prince is taking those reps, okay, what happens with Clyde? I feel like at the very least, he's going to be an insurance blanket because they trust him and he knows the system. But I'm still looking for some high-end emphasis on that, something else that can bring something speed-wise in particular to that position. So I am still, despite all these evidence of progress, I'll call it, I'm not convinced that there isn't a running back that will be on this 53 that is not currently in Chiefs camp.
We'll see. I'm curious to see what they continue to do. There's so many different positions that you talk about. And when we talk about, getting the right 22, getting the right starters, I mean, you look at, I think they're kind of set at defensive tackle. I think that Nadi is going to be their guy next to Chris Jones. Defensive end, I think they've kind of got it figured out. But, corner, are they going to be keeping everybody that they have, or are they going to be trading somebody away? Linebacker, you have to feel like they have a pretty good idea of who's going to be on the team. Safety, I think you have to feel you're pretty good there. You talk about running back, that's probably one of the only positions where if somebody came available that was a high-end guy, maybe that they go that direction. But if they can't get somebody that's a big improvement over what they have, I don't expect them to go spend money. One guy I want to throw out there really quick, because it was brought out that he is continuously possibly going to be cut. How would you feel about Juju coming back for a year on a low deal?
I think it shores up the bottom of the roster, but he's at no more than number 4. Would he beat out Justin Watson? Possibly. I'm not even convinced of that, but he isn't breaking into the top 3. So it would have to be on a deal that is A, economical, and B, with the understanding that you're not going to get the kind of field time that you're used to, and you have to increase your output from what we saw last time you were here.
Well, to me, it's interesting because I do think that it's, when you look at the back end of this roster, and we've talked about this, he would have to basically beat out a guy like Justin Watson, because Juju isn't going to be a special teams guy, and 5th and 6th wide receivers are going to be, generally speaking, your special teams wide receivers. So I don't think that it's really that big of a scenario unless Justin Watson is a guy that they find doesn't have it this year. I'm not going to say that's not possible, but in my mind, that's probably the only way that happens, because I don't think they're keeping 7 wide receivers. I don't think they can, for multiple reasons.
Agreed. It's an evolution. They're going to have to find the right guys, the right fit, and I agree. It can only be 6 at this point. But there's also an evolution everywhere else, and input that you trust makes a difference. There was a visitor at Chiefs camp that might have an impact this season that no one expected. John Gruden's visit, what does it mean? Coming up next. You love sports just like I do, and you love them so much you never want them to stop. But the playoffs have come and go. It's baseball season, and now it's training camp. There's always something to get into the action, and wherever you want to go, you can do it with one app on FanDuel and place any bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's giving away to all customers either a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com. You can even take a look at the Chiefs right now. They are plus 600 for the next Super Bowl, the three-peat Super Bowl. You can go to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer right now. There's still time left in this summer. FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook betting partner of Major League Baseball and the NFL. Folks, make sure that you like, sub, and hit the bell so that you know everything that's going on as we break news here on Locked On Chiefs and on the audio platforms of Spotify and Apple Music. Also, make sure you get out of Casey Chiefs Corner so that you can see everything Chris is doing, breaking down the cap, preparing you for the quarterback evolution, and how we're going to get more evidence out there for Patrick not being number 4 in this league. But as well as a ton, you can get it over on NFL. What's that?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, in this week, I've got I updated my roster projection.
Perfect. So, also, you can get more information around the league and what's going on in NFL 33 and over on RGR Football, the way that I break down this team as well. So, a lot of hubbub in certain circles. You found it on a couple of the rumor mills. Pro Football Talk had it. And then you got some reaction to the fact that a shorter, elderly, I don't know if elderly is the right word, but older coach happened to show up for this 10-10-10. And we'll see if he's out there again tomorrow, who is an old friend of Andy Reid, who's been out of the league for a couple of years, but is generally recognized, despite his off-the-field issues, as a offensive juggernaut of a coach. And John Gruden being in camp today in Chiefs gear, not necessarily just a visitor, don't know what it means. Hopefully we'll find that out. But I don't think it necessarily matters. I mean, we've seen Andy bring in people he knows in a advisor role in the past. I could see that as a possibility. It could just be that John was passing through Kansas City and decided to come by. I think there's still something to be gleaned from it, only because you get a guy with that much experience out on the practice field in training camp, even if it's a 10-10-10, and he's just jabbering with his old coaching mate. They were together in Green Bay. They know each other for a long time. Even if he just makes some kind of observation about X player or X play, Andy Reid's going to have it in his ear, and he's going to listen to that. And that gets the creative juices turning for Andy Reid. I think it could have a ripple effect on something that we see on the field this year.
It's funny. You talk about getting the creative juices of Andy Reid flowing. Not that he ever really needs help with that, because he's always been he's always had those creative juices flowing. And I agree, this could create even more. It's interesting to me that he shows up at training camp today and he's in Chiefs gear. If he's not in Chiefs gear, I think that there's a little bit of a different statement there. But being in more of like a coaching type of attire, that to me suggests that there's something more there than just visiting. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it's still interesting to have him out there and have him next to Reed. I do think that Andy, you're right. Andy respects him, and I do think that there is a possibility that they're going to use this and it's going to bring something else out onto this roster that they don't already have. And, go back a couple of years. Brad Childress was with Andy Reid in a consultant type role. And the reality is we don't really know what Brad Childress brought to this team. We may never know what John Gruden may bring to this team if he's working in that same type of role, but there's going to be something there and it's going to be a little bit different. And we may never get specifics on it, but it doesn't really matter. Anything that you can do to change what you're already doing and expand on what you're already doing and bring something else and bring a mind like that to this team is going to be a lot of fun because this team has more speed. And you already talked about this earlier. They have more speed than they've ever had on offense. And they have more guys that can track the ball on offense than they've ever had. So that's going to be something to watch as we continue, going into the final week of training camp before the first preseason game. I think that's a big thing. Just thinking that they're 5 days away practically at this point from playing a preseason game. They only got a couple more practices. I think they have, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they're off Thursday, Friday before they go to, because they go to Jacksonville. So you've only got a couple practices left. And it still looks like you're in a situation where you have a pretty good idea of where you're at in most places, but you can still put plays in. You can still put different things in to kind of attack. Don't expect to see him in the preseason, but Baltimore, be ready. Week 1.
Yeah, you never know.
Best QB,
I think
best QB in football playing for Baltimore, according to the NFL. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Yeah, we will see how that goes. I think it's an interesting conversation because, I had to start so Andy, I'm going to be in town and I promise I won't do laps around the field or anything, but can I come by and see practice?
Right.
It's just the evolution there. They coached together at the heyday of Brett Favre in the early 90s for 3 seasons together on the same staff. So despite all that drama that has happened while he was in Las Vegas and obviously the whole ring around the rosy around the stadium and the fact that the Chiefs have put those interesting pre-snap motion plays in against the Raiders, I think specifically, despite all that, they go back to the same roots under Mike Holmgren. And I think that is probably the branch that this all goes back to, that Andy's going to know that he sees the game in a similar way that Andy does. And any input there, even if it's not directed, even if it's just like, oh, that guy does this, any observations, I think, could lead to something changing. So I just find that super, super interesting and something we should keep an eye on going forward. Maybe he shows up tomorrow.
And go back to when Mahomes was drafted. Gruden was working for, I believe it was ESPN at the time, and he did the QB days where he bring in all the top prospects, and Gruden absolutely loved Patrick Mahomes. Gruden has been watching Patrick Mahomes since before he went back to coaching. So that's another scenario. I'm not saying that he's going to have a big impact on Patrick Mahomes, but maybe he looks at what Patrick Mahomes can do and says, Andy, why don't you try something like this? And it's a whole new wrinkle that they haven't used with Mahomes in the past. And Mahomes is always doing whatever he can to get better. So to me, it's a win-win. And if Gruden can bring anything to the team, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And again, like I said, I think 3-peats inbound. I think that this offense is going to really take it to teams this year. I just hope Andy Reid is willing to let Mahomes take the pedal to the metal on a regular basis, because I think that's what's going to cause some teams in the NFL to really not want to play Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. And it's going to be a good start to the season. If you want to make some points, if you want to make some statements, you have the teams in the AFC on your schedule that you can do that. And I agree. I think they should just hammer that gas pedal down. What do you think? Does the Gruden thing mean anything? Are we overly hopeful? Do you think that they are sorting out those position groups that they're trying to find the right 22 for. Let us know in the comments down below here on YouTube or on your reviews on iTunes. Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever you get. We're going to be back with you tomorrow as the team continues its preparation for preseason game number 1, which will sort out a lot of things and look for a huge change next week after that ball game. We're going to have it all for you here because we are here 5 days a week. Plus, get on that text line at 816-357-8781. Thanks for your time. Enjoy your Monday. Have a